before we go on into the grief and loss?
That would be a no.
That would be
No,
a no. That's kind
No,
of
it was interesting that I learned a bit about the culture of Christianity and the comparisons. That was my first time hearing that phrase, cultural Christianity. I know I see it, but I knew it was terminology designated for that type of group or that mindset. So it was good reading up on it, trying to get an understanding of it. And I like the reading. I did my homework, but I like
okay.
because it was one while I'm speaking. It says, "What do the author mean by saying that many Christians have developed a distaste for doctrine?" It was another one, and it had me go back and read the book over. I mean, read that chapter over again.
Mm-hmm.
But I came up with, because Christian has adopted, we want deeds, not creeds, and it was giving us the comparisons of more actions, but the creed to buy into or to adopt the creed helps set our behavior towards the deeds that come from the creed. So our belief in our Bible, our spirituality is she just threw me off with her son or whoever that was.
Yeah, I just tried to mute her, so go ahead.
But so just to understand that the creed come first for us to believe in, and then our actions come from what we know about God and what he asks us to do. That really stood out. I got some understanding on that. So it was some things that I liked it in this chapter when it came to truth.
Yeah, I think that you're bringing out an important point, because this is one thing I've seen, that Christian churches today focus more on actions than on what's the belief that motivates those actions. And I think we talked about that a little bit last week, that you can be moved by your passions, you can be moved by your convictions, but you have to be moved by our belief in what the Bible says. And that distaste of doctrine, you hear it a lot from pulpits, because in the past, doctrine may have been real religious, right? Or they focused on ritual and ceremony, and the people didn't have that personal interaction with God. They were just marching through rites and ceremonies. But if we don't have a knowledge of what the Bible says, just like Timothy says, we're going to be blown about by every wind of doctrine. And I'm completely alarmed at some of the weird things that are going on and being propagated in the body of Christ today, from people that are actually Christians, because they don't know about the Trinity. They don't know about Jesus being manifest in the flesh, incarnate, and you need to teach that. And in our schools particularly, you need to teach, because they teach the theory of evolution. We need to be teaching our children about Genesis creation. And we're foregoing that, and we're jumping way to the what's supposed to be the results as the primary thing. So yeah, I'm really happy with this book, and I really am feel that we need to really spend some focus on doctrine to understand what does the Bible actually teach, so that we have a manifestation of what the Bible is saying. Okay, so I'm starting the slide. Can everybody see that? Week 7?
No.
Yes or, I'm sorry, no?
No.
Okay.
It's not sharing.
It's not sharing. All right. Because I wanted to be able to see you, and so let's see. Stop video. Let me do this again. Let's do the screen share. All right, now
There
can
it
you see
is.
it?
There we go. Yep. Yeah.
All right. All right, so we're going to start. Okay, any other, come on. There we go. Any other comments before we talk about grief and loss? Okay, well, let's move on then. All right, what is loss? Talk to me about what you feel is lost. How you,
It's like to depart depart from something that was once something that was once that you were attached to, something that was a part of something that meant something to you, or that you were connected to, and to go on without this person or job or car. Maybe you lost, if it stopped running or something, you really had attachment to this car and you had it for a very long time. It could be anything that you had a connection with, and to just come out of, out of
Okay, well,
nowhere and lose this certain thing.
I don't have any food. No.
okay, well, that I like what you said there, Bridget, because you said something so often, and then you mentioned a car. A loss can be an emotional thing, a physical thing, a person.
Mhm,
It could be a sense, right? It could be security. And
mhm,
it's, as the book says, it's a simple four-letter word that's part of everyone's life. And
mhm,
we need to be able to understand it and process it. I don't say accept it, because I like to resist things to fight against the effect, but you have to be able to adjust to it.
mhm,
Okay, significant losses in life are likely to engender overwhelming negative emotions, disruption in everyday life, and long-term problems in resolving the loss. Loss to one person is not a loss to another. And I think that's what we kind of minimize somebody's reaction to a feeling of loss or a loss in their lives. And we have to be able to validate that it may not be something you've experienced. Doreen said loss can be spiritual. That's true.
Right.
You can
Absolutely.
lose something in that realm. So, for example, one person can experience a miscarriage and it doesn't seem to affect them. Another person, it's
Devastating.
it's a serious death to them, and it can affect them in many ways. It's based on a value,
mhm,
right? What do we value? And a lot of times when we deal with children who are on a sports team or whatever, or you're playing a game, oh, it's just a game. But you've invested something in that. And especially, I think we minimize things that are losses to children because it's a smaller part of our world. We've already passed that. So, like a silent conspiracy, we seem to have an unspoken agreement with others not to talk about our losses. So many times people say, I don't know what to say. And so they just ignore it. Many years ago, a pastor that supported us lost his sister to cancer. And he sent us a picture of a big elephant in the room, because there's losses like this big elephant in the room that's there, but you're trying to work around, and people are uncomfortable with dealing with loss. You know, we just want people to get over it, and we don't know how to help them manage it, right? Okay. In our culture, people have an intolerance for suffering. If somebody is not cool, we look down on them because they're a loser, but experiencing loss does not make us a loser, right? Everybody, even winners, experience loss. You know, champions experience loss. And today we have, to minimize that feeling of loss, we have participation trophies. You know, nobody's losing, everybody is all the same. But the fact of the matter is, people are more gifted or have gotten more runs in the game or scored more points, or if you're in a wrestling match, you know, somebody wins and somebody loses. And this is something that we have to learn how to deal with in our lives, right? That we are going to lose, that people are going to lose something. Not everybody is going to get a gold medal, right? So every loss comes with the potential for change, growth, new insights, understanding, and refinement, all positive descriptions and hope. But we can also, it also comes with the potential for depression or a diminishing of our sense of self-worth or security, right? After 9/11, so many people felt insecure. We always thought nobody is ever going to attack this country the way that these terrorists dared to invade our country. And we find that these kind of things are surging up all over the world. So today there is a significant loss of security. And why is that? Why do we have a lack of security?
We're not infallible.
Right, it breaks.
Yeah, and that's not a comfortable feeling, is it? That we're not infallible. I was going to go on, but I see a comment here on my notes. When we're talking about people with intense reactions, and we kind of glorify someone who doesn't seem to be affected by tragic events, and we look at it that, oh, somebody is not handling it well because they're not manifesting significant outward emotions. But on the contrary, we could be stuffing it, right? And we all know, or should be learning to understand what happens when we stuff our emotions. That is a question.
It comes back eventually. It will come out, and usually at a time that you really don't want to deal with it. And I know personally, in my experience, I believe that some of the things that as I in my spiritual growth, I guess things are I'm seeing things that I never really dealt with. And it can really upset your whole everything, every part of you. So yeah, I think it's just, you don't know it's coming, and it will eventually come out, and you either deal with it then or you stuff it back down. It'll come out later, and it can come out physically, sickness, or eating disorders, or addictions, so many things that stuffing that loss or stuffing that down will cause. So.
Okay. All right, Anna raised her hand, and then Tolan. After that, Tolan, you can go ahead after Anna gets done. Go ahead, Anna.
And what she said was very good. And also, I've experienced lately when people stuff things all that stuff she said happens to their body. But another thing that's happening now, people are becoming mentally ill because of all the stuff that they have harbored for years, and they begin to lose their memory, really lose their memory. And that's when dementia set in. And as one person in my family we have experienced this with this person, all the stuff that she's been holding in for years. But not only that, all the stuff that she's been holding in comes out in an angry way, and she can't even remember. So it's a lot to stuff in that we, a lot of times we need to get to the bottom of these things with people, because it's going to come out one way or another.
Right. I think as Christians, sometimes I'm missing a slide here. No, I'm missing a slide. Okay. I don't know what happened to the next slide. Yeah, as Christians, we have a tendency to minimize these things that are in the emotional realm, but it does affect us, and we do need to learn how to deal with it spiritually. One of the things I was alluding to when we're talking about the lack of security is that we are depending in the wrong thing. We are depending on systems, we are depending on our own abilities, and our trust has to be in God, who is our defender. And there's a scripture that talks about the name of the Lord is a strong tower, the righteous run into it and are safe. And so I'm going to read what I have for what is supposed to be the next slide. It might turn up later on. I may have to reinsert it. It says, what do you know about loss? Identify it in yourself. Okay, we need, that's one starting point, that we need to be able to find out where we've experienced loss and accept the reality of it. One of the symptoms of grief and loss is denial, right? We're going to talk about it. But accepting loss does not mean, for example, that we have forgiven a person, that we have forgotten the person, sorry. Sometimes we think that by holding on to that feeling, we're not letting the memory of the person that we've lost go. And we have to recognize how we filter it. We accept the new reality or adjust. We don't just forget. God doesn't erase our memories, right? Sometimes we block out things. Our mind, as a defense mechanism, blocks out things. And then, like Cindy says, it comes up later. It doesn't disappear. It's in our brain. So we have to adjust to the new reality, and our filter is how we process it. So our belief system filters what we see, hear, or affect, or how we believe, and it affects our perceptions. So if we have a belief that there's nothing after death, that all we have is what is material and what we're experiencing in this life, that affects how you see things, how you interpret things, how you're going to live. So it takes work to look at ourselves and identify how our beliefs affect us positively and negatively. And then by doing that, it can help us look at a client and help identify the loss in a client. Sometimes they can't put their finger on what is troubling them. Okay, we can help them to accept the new reality and make an adjustment. And in ourselves and for them, we need to recognize the effect on current losses and the ability to make future attachments, right? When we haven't dealt with loss before, then it affects how we face it in the present and in the future. And years ago, there was a Super Bowl commercial for a car company, and it was saying how fast the car was or something. Don't remember. It doesn't matter what model car it was, but while a child was at school, their goldfish died. And then, so their parents are all panicking, and they run out into this car and go find another goldfish that looks like their goldfish and puts it in the bowl so that the child doesn't know that their goldfish died. Now, what is wrong with that?
Lie.
That's deception.
The purpose.
It is deception. One thing, it is deception, right? I even if we did tooth fairy stuff, I didn't tell my children there was a tooth fairy. Now that may seem sad, but many children, because they have felt deceived when they found out there is no Santa Claus. Right? My parents, some people did, right? Some children did. My parents lied to me. And so that's like, oh, you have developed distrust. So yes, deception is one symptom. What is there something else that you can think of about doing that to your child?
Protection.
It seems like protection, right? It
But
seems
that could
like,
be devastating to them also.
Right. I agree. 100% agree.
okay, a loss is a difficult thing, right? But is that preparing them?
No.
Go ahead, Etta. I'll wait. You go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not preparing them for other losses, because when you start preparing them, then when other losses come down a little bit more devastating, they'll have that experience. I don't know if you want to look at it like that, but everyone experiences loss. So at some point, you got to be able to face those losses. And by not letting children experience that, you're telling them that, oh, nothing dies, nothing, everything lasts. And then that's false, because they're going to find out, even at school, when you go to school, there's losses. And a lot of kids don't know how to handle losses, which leads to anger, rage, and they don't know where to go with their emotions. So letting them experience that loss, even if it's a goldfish or a pet, prepares them for future losses that will come in their lives.
Well, that was basically, Etta, my point in bringing this up into this, injecting it into this part. Doreen said you aren't teaching them that it's okay to grieve, to cry, or how to accept death. And that goes along with that. And then Anna raised her hand first, and then Madeline, go ahead after Anna. Go ahead, Anna.
Madeline.
Oh, I thought I saw Anna's hand too. Go ahead then, Madeline. I don't know if she took her hand.
You did. I just put my hand down. It's okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Pastor Anna.
No, I was just going to say that it's not reality, because then they'll think you can replace anything that dies or anything that happened in your life, that you'll be able to fix it. Miss Etta said a lot in that too. So.
Okay. All right. That's true. That goes on with that. Go ahead, Madeline.
And as I'm listening, to this, it just reminds me so much of the letter N of the Gen Xers and the millennials and the Gen Zs, because they have been brought up that, you replace everything, you give them everything. They're not supposed to have any kind of loss, like you were saying before, the participation trophies. Good job. If I hear that one more time, and I know I will, it's a good job if you do a good job. If you don't do a good job, oh, better next time. You can, don't stop telling them it's good when it's not good. Let them experience the loss of, okay, I need to improve. I need to get this done a little better. The coach, the parent, whatever is there to help them along. But our younger people, that's why it's so easy for them to be at a job and you hurt my feelings, I'm not coming back. They may not have a place to lay their head, but they don't care. You hurt my feelings and I'm not coming back. So they don't know how to experience loss. On the job, they're told, okay, this isn't correct. I need you to do this particular task this way. Oh, you've upset me. You've upset me. I'm doing it the way I think it should be done. So they don't know how to experience any kind of a loss. Graduate them from school, from preschool. Because, oh, they should get to wear a cap and gown too. They may not graduate from 12th grade. Well, okay. I know they will. You know, it's just, it boggles my brain.
That's a good point. We need to be, when we go to a job, they expect us to perform to a certain level because they're paying us, right? And if our supervisor is not happy if we're coming in late, you know, and as well, you know, I have this to get here. Well, if you have to deal with that to get here, leave a few minutes early, right? They don't. So that's important too, because you have to learn how to meet certain standards in life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else that I missed? Anybody? Okay, Anna, do you have your hand up again?
Yes, I just wanted to say this, that nowadays these children don't understand what no means. Don't tell them no, because they're going to do exactly the opposite. And like Dr. Mallett was saying about, because we've been hiring people, and I declare unto you, they'll just text you or call you, I quit, for no reason at all, because they're not used to having anything but their way. And the loss of somebody, and you're not letting them grieve, it's like you're not allowing them to understand what real life is all about. This is real life. Loss is real life. But yes, we do want you to grieve. We do want you to understand, but it's nothing we can do about some things. There's nothing you can do about it. And they need to know that.
And so our job, I think this is like the foundation of how we deal with everybody, is helping them to go through a loss and come out on the other side better and positive, and not have it be devastating or have it have a serious long-term negative effect. Obviously, the short-term emotions or uncomfortableness is difficult. So there's different type of losses that even we might not think about, and so we're just going to cover these very, very quickly. There's natural losses. As we get older, our eyesight changes. We're not as strong. We can lose muscle mass. Unspeakable losses, things we can't talk about, and frequent losses, gradual losses, things that happen over a period of time. I think accumulated losses is something that has a very serious potential for trauma, because you have stuff piling on top of other issues, other events piling on top of each other, and that's can be like the straw that breaks the camel back. Identity losses. I was this person's partner, and they're no longer part of my life. So that could be a relationship with a male or female relationship, but a lot of people experience identity loss when my kids move out and I'm no longer Joey's mom. right? Threatened losses when can be something like you're expecting layoffs. Okay, unexpected losses. That's when you're not expecting it. It kind of hits us in the face, and it produces a big explosion at the beginning, but it can it's not as much as it building up to it. Final losses, things that cannot be changed. Okay. Material losses like losing your car, a relationship, we've lost a friend. Intrapsychic loss is how we look at ourselves. Okay, so something may happen to change the way I perceive myself, whether it's the loss of relationship, the loss of a job, the loss of some of our capacities, like our memory or a body part, but something happens to change how we look at ourselves. It could be bullying, a functional loss. We might lose our fingers or our memory, a role loss, a loss of a job, systemic loss reminds me of a hole in an organization or a system. It reminds me of a person I know that when her lead pastor turned the direction of her church over to somebody else, it changed her world. That person, there was a loss in her church, and it really affected her, which and that happens in society too, right? A well-known figure, prominent figure is lost, and a sector of society feels like they've lost their shepherd. They've lost a founding stone in their foundation. Ambiguous loss is something that you can't quite put your finger on it, like somebody that's missing in action. You've lost somebody, but you don't know whether they're alive or dead, or a runaway, or someone that's kidnapped, for example. Those, you don't know what's happened to the person, the thing. Yeah, it could be a thing. You've lost something, a valuable treasure to you, and it's around, but you don't know, and it's something you can't put your finger on. A disenfranchised loss is something that can't not be acknowledged openly. For example, you have an illicit relationship with a married person and they die, or they end their relationship and stay with their spouse. It cannot actually go to the funeral and say and weep, because you have supposedly have no right. And so there's something that you can't acknowledge publicly, or is not recognized as a legitimate loss. Okay. Some other things, let me just go back, that people minimize, maybe a death of a pet can produce loss. Moving can produce loss. Starting school can be a loss. The death of a former spouse, the marriage of your child, for example. Graduation is a loss. Children that graduate are no longer considered children, right? And they've lost whatever way of life that they're accustomed to, that sheltered way of life, and they're out there trying to figure out what to do with their lives. The ending of an addiction can be a loss. Major health changes, retirement, a promotion can be a positive thing, but it can also be a loss. A financial change, holidays. I think as chaplains, we're well aware that holidays can bring feelings of loss, legal problems. I mentioned the empty nest type of feeling of loss. Age milestones. How many know people that when they reached a number that ended in O, that it affected them?
I'm one of them.
And that's, why? Because we've expected something, and that's a disappointment. We've gotten to some place, and what is we're
Yeah,
not.
when I turned,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I was saying that happened to me when I turned 50, and it's supposed to have been a an exciting time for some people, and they're getting ready for their big celebration, and they're going to this new beyond. But I was so hurt. I felt so bad. So my sister, she said, "What's wrong with you? You made it to 50. You should. That's a blessing." I said, "No, you don't get it. You just don't understand.
Right.
I'm
And
in
we
my
don't get it,
40s.
do we?
No,
We don't get it.
right.
When I turned 50, I thought, oh, like 50 years, like the year of Jubilee. And I was like, I'm set free, woo, But how about now that some of us are a little bit beyond that, what can you sympathize or empathize rather with someone who turns 30 and feels like a loss? Not really, right? You're 30
We
years
try
old.
to. Look, we try to, but it's kind of hard. We don't negate what they're feeling, but we do let them know, just wait a while.
Right. But it's because they've reached a place that they thought, or we thought, that it would be different. Something would be different. We would have reached a certain point, achieved something, or we look and we say, we only have this much time to do X, Y, Z, right? So,
Right.
it's just bringing these things up so that we can help understand how people are dealing with the different types of loss in their lives. And I think and we try to stop people or protect them from feeling loss. So you can lose something without going through grief and moving to mourning. Okay. Grief is defined as an intense emotional suffering. It's a lingering process that encompasses a number of changes. There's a lot of symptoms: shock, denial, anger. We can become depressed. We can try bargaining. Even if people don't believe in God, they kind of bargain. You could maybe not sleep or eat or focus. They need help functioning. One lady that recently experienced the loss of a husband, she's always handled, actually two people, finances. They've always been, but they needed help doing some of the normal finances that they've always done. So in the grief and loss book, there is a graph, a picture of stages of grief and trauma and how we move through that. I just took a look at that recently. It's a good thing to copy, to be able to give to people so that we understand that it's not like you experience something one time and it disappears. The different stages or symptoms or feelings come in and out of our lives. Sometimes years later, after a death or a loss, something can just provoke it. It's like setting off a trap. It's not something that can be cured like a disease, but it could feel like sickness. Okay, since it has many stages and that don't come in a certain order, you can't apply cookie cutter solutions. So when we're dealing with grief and loss, each situation needs to be treated specifically. Okay. And mourning is an expression of grief, and I think we talked about that. People don't want they're uncomfortable with you expressing your grief. They don't want you to do it around them. And I think we have to become comfortable with letting people express their intense emotions and not say this isn't acceptable. Even if we don't understand why we have those emotions, they're there. And God uses that to bring healing. It's part of God's plan for healing. And so the purpose of grief is to help us to go beyond the physical and emotional reactions and to look at the change and start to adjust to it. And it helps us to come up to a point where we can make these changes. And so there is a certain amount of time that is acceptable to postpone changes, but there does need to come a point where we do need to make changes in our perspective and to go on and to learn how to live with the change, with the loss. Okay, you were so-and-so's spouse. My relationship with my spouse when they pass is different, right? And learning how to deal with that in a healthy way. There was a thought that came to me that disappeared. Hopefully it'll come back before too long. So people can get stuck.
Sorry for your loss.
Yes, we can get stuck, and sometimes we need help to kind of give a little nudge. And I just remember what I was thinking of. Sometimes some people want to, for example, get rid of all the stuff dealing with the loss, the person, and sometimes people want to hold on to it as a way of not losing the person, but eventually you have to start to get rid of their belongings, right? You can't keep all that stuff there. I think is it Meadowbrook Hall? Is that the Dodge place where there's a room of one of their children, the way it was when they left, when they passed, and it became, well, obviously it's a more of a grandiose place than what we have, but we can't leave our kids' bedroom the same way when they graduate and walk out to if they go away to college and don't move back home. We can't keep it that way forever. So we need to learn how to go forward, and we're not forgetting the thing that we've lost. Okay, so we need to help people, or we need to learn how to reframe the loss, and it is part of the grief process. Okay, in the book, I think it talks about the beginning, but I think you have to continually in grief reframe. We have to see how the relationship has changed. I have it down here, Proverbs 18:14. The spirit of man will sustain him in his infirmity, but a wounded spirit who can bear? So when we have a healthy relationship with God, that can uphold us. But when we're wounded, we can't do it by ourselves. Okay? So people want you to get on with life. I've changed that to move forward with life, because you can't leave it behind. It's become part of us, right? They want us to just get over it and go on. But it's more moving through it and moving forward. We need to develop a new relationship meaning we need to recognize the change and develop new ways of relating to our loss. we have to make it real. Don't only remember the good part of the job that we got fired from or lost, but the bad too. Yeah, I don't know what the scraping sound is. I don't know where that's coming from, Doreen. I don't know where that's from. But I can hear it too. So we know we don't want to only think about the good parts of our relationships or the bad parts, but it's a whole. So we need to be realistic about what it was, and that, okay, we have a balanced image of the past. Okay, let me look into the next thing here. All right. Any comments or thoughts up to this point? No hands, nothing? Okay. So we have certain defense mechanisms that are kind of built into us. And, you know, I think everybody has heard about the fight or flight, but there's also freeze, right? Sometimes we fight something, sometimes we run away, and sometimes we're just frozen and can't react. This can't be true. This can't be happening to me. Since the beginning of the year, I've experienced several people have passed away, and it's like a week later, it's like, oh, this can't be true. It's to adjust to the fact that that person is not going to be there the next time I go to pick up the phone. People try to say, especially a child, oh, it's not that bad. Like they fall down and hurt their knee. It's not that bad. It's rationalization. Well, they were 90 years old. They lived a good life. So that means I'm not supposed to miss them, right? Idealization, we only look at the positive of what we've lost.
Trish, can I say something?
Sure.
On the idealization, I have a friend who the father of her children, well, he was abusive. He had post-traumatic stress syndrome from being in the war, and he also was an alcoholic. So he was very abusive physically. He would do things that, not beating his kids, but he would pull a knife out on his wife. It was really horrible. Well, he died, and the children are all grown, and today they have forgotten all those things, and they idolize him. Every time it's his birthday or certain times of the year, they will say things about him and just how great he was and wonderful. And I remember being around that situation when things were going on, and when I see those things now, it's like it breaks my heart that they have that kind of thinking that way.
Right. I know you've mentioned that in my presence previously. And then there is the aspect, God does say to honor your parents, right? So, but there is a beyond that, going beyond that. And it's hard to, I have a relative who had a very controlling and at least verbally abusive parent. And it produces kind of a, I don't know, kind of like a dichotomy. I can't think of the right word in trying to think, well, how do you reconcile honoring your parent when they were basically, you consider them evil, right? So that is something that is hard to reconcile too, when you can overlook it and go one way, or you could absolutely hate them. And so, go ahead, Anna.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but a lot of people and young people, even though they're grown and all they went through with their parents, they idolize them because of this one particular young lady, because they're still looking for that love that they didn't get. So that's their way of saying that the parent loved them in spite of what they did, in spite of all the negative stuff that went on in their lives and still causing them problems today. That's their way of saying that they still love them, because a lot of times young people, they can't conceive that my parent didn't love me, that my parent did all this to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a shame, you know, that people are that way.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. It's hard to reconcile that and deal with those type of things. So, was someone going to say something? So, when we're helping people and we need to understand loss and grieving in order to be able to help them. And it doesn't mean that we have to reconcile every particular incident that we've ever faced, but because we're constantly going to be going through healing and being transformed into the image and of Christ and his character. So we're always going to be growing and changing as long as we're serving God. But we need to help people to acknowledge and understand their loss. Okay, the intensity of the grief and length of the process can be determined by the intensity of the attachment. Okay, if it didn't mean much to you, it's not going to have a long effect, right? If somebody that is in your sphere, a friend of a friend, gets hit by a car, it's not going to affect you like if it's your brother or sister, right? Some people kind of milk the grieving process, right? They kind of like the feeling of feeling bad. They actually like the pain. They like being down, and they like people paying attention to them. So that can also provoke them to drag it out. So they keep getting the attention. They keep having people call. And that's something that we have to address. How someone died, the circumstances surrounding their death, the factors, life-changing events, and social structure of the survivor's life will say something about how they grieve. How somebody died, Nash. Is it natural? Is it accidental? Is it suicidal? Or is it a homicidal death? Okay, those are increasing intensities of factors that affect their death. So all those different things affect how we're going to grieve. If I don't have any support structure, then, and I don't have somebody to share with me and help me, it affects how I'm going to survive the loss. People are uncomfortable with the person repeating and repeatedly talking about their loss. But we want them to talk about it. When you go to the funeral home, that person, the family member or the friends, they talk about several times to several people during the visitation time, what happened, how they were dealing with it. And that's helping people to process it. But we get tired of hearing about it, right? But we need to address it and help them understand that what they're going through is normal. It's common. Sometimes we think we're the only ones. Well, if you're abused, you're not the only one to feel that way. You're not the only one to feel that rage. You're not the only one to feel that loss of security, the loss of integrity to your person. If it was a parent, the loss of, I should have had a parent who loved me and took care of me. And those are common reactions. common feelings. And so we don't want to perpetuate the anger and pain, but when you feel like you're the only one and no one else understands and no one else has ever been through that, then it can keep you a prisoner. But knowing that somebody has faced that situation and come out on the other side standing, that helps, right? So we want to help the survivor to take charge of their life.
December 15, 1973, the Beverly Hills Hotel, Los Angeles, California, 11 years before the breakup of the band.
We can't hear you, Bridget. Are you talking to us?
Our hotel boss, very corny.
It was, it was lovely. It really was. I mean, with the gold goblets on the tables and the whole 9 yards. Jermaine, he was happy.
Somebody is talking and it's not being,
Their musical career is in the doldrums.
It sounds like a TV or a radio or something.
Yeah, that's not me. Somebody's TV is on.
yeah, I don't know where that is coming from. And it seems like everybody is muted. So I don't know where that's coming from. There's nothing going on in where I'm at. So, but it disappeared. So the buzzing stopped that was there a few minutes ago. Okay. So yeah. Here's some kind of practical ideas that the book gives to helping people through their grief. Now, one of the things down at the bottom talks about writing a letter. And I remember in a seminar, one of our seminars, a lady talked very disparagingly about a therapist asking her to write a letter. She didn't understand, it didn't affect her, but so, when we're recommending some of these things, it's not just an exercise. We also have to see how it is helping them. It's not just an exercise that, you're just doing it like a homework assignment, but that it's actually producing some type of effect or healing or advancing them. Making a list of the effects of their loss. Well, we do have to understand if you get a divorce, for example, what are some of the effects of that divorce? It could be positive that we don't have the arguing and the negative interaction that make you feel bad or hurt your self-esteem. But when a couple splits up, there is a financial effect. Go ahead, Bridget.
Yeah, I was going to say that when that was a good point you made about the divorce, because the divorce is like grief. It's like a death. It's like a grieving process that you go through because you're going to, be alone again. So you have to do everything, individually. And like you said, it could be a financial strain because you have to take care of these things, on your own. And you have to go through the emotional, stress from being, from the breakup, but then apart from this person. And some people can't handle that, emotionally. And that falls into that mental health again, go back to that part. That falls into that mental health because healing is a process. And it's all a part of that emotional damage and healing from that. And then all the things that you can fall back into. Like you said, some people do different things. They drink alcohol and, different things. They may have a sex addiction that they recover from. Anything that they were addiction that they recover from, taking drugs or anything that they can go back into something that you didn't do that from before. So it's like a different, it's like the same area of losing a loved one, a friend. It all falls in that same category of grieving, because it's really like the same pain that you would feel. It's the same pain that you would go through of not being with that person, especially if you've been with them, for over 20 years or 10 years or whatever it is. But any time spent in that marriage, it depends on how it ended, can be very damaging, mentally.
Right, because it can be supposedly amicable, but there are repercussions. In my mom's day, there was this tremendous rise of feminism, right? Because in the past, you were stayed home, you were a homemaker, and they were degrading the importance of being a parent at home. And so you need this, they started that rise of self-realization, and you're good enough and you don't need that man and all this other stuff. And they neglected the effect of it that it actually had on the partners, each of the partners, and the family members and the children, right?
Right.
So there's effects of the law. So realizing what is going to happen, because if you don't have this income, are you going to be able to maintain living in the same structure? Right?
Right.
So there's different practical things and emotional things
Mm-hmm.
that help people understand what they're going to face. Go ahead, Etta, and there's somebody else. Wait, there's somebody else besides Etta. Oh, is that Bridget still from before? Maybe.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I have to
Okay,
take this.
go ahead, Etta.
Okay, I have a list of things down. I have loss of a person as a partner, the loss of income. They have the loss of doing things together with that person. You got to do things on your own. And then there's an embarrassment that comes with that. People see you. Failure. You feel like there's a failure, that you started out something, you thought it was going to be, this wonderful life together. And then if you have children who may be kind of confused about what's going on, and you got to try to explain to them what happened. So those are just some of the things that I jotted down.
Bridget, did you raise your hand again?
No, I'm sorry. That was a mistake. I was trying to lower it and I pushed it.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're covering anybody that wants to has some input that they feel would be helpful. Okay, so the book talks about making like index cards with them with the following statement. I've adjusted the first statement and I didn't change it on the slide. I've changed it in the book, but I didn't change it in the slide. I believe my grief has a purpose and an end. And I changed it to an end result, or has a result, an end result, because our grief, I still grieve my grandfather, that I miss him. He died 35 or 6 years ago, right? We think that it's going to be over and it's never going to affect us again. But when we have something that's valuable that we lose, it doesn't just disappear. It kind of gets intertwined into what we are, what we do, but it doesn't just disappear. The strong effects may diminish, but things could all of a sudden come up and make you bring a tear to your eyes, right? Go ahead, Kathy.
Sorry, I was muted. The first thing, one of the things that came to me, not only is grief hurtful and hard and devastating, but you got to turn it around, and I feel it's like it gives you the inner strength and peace to know that you are going through something that you're getting out of it. It will not stay exactly where it's at, and you can always go somewhere else, and it's okay. Change is good. As much as it's hurtful, you can make it happy too at the same time. That's just my weirdness. That's all.
Right. It doesn't, that's a good point. It doesn't stay the same. It's not always going to be in the same way. And, we don't like change. Sometimes we like the familiar. Some of us have a more difficult time with change, but yeah, we're not in that. It's not always going to be exactly the same. Go ahead, Madeline.
I just wanted to know, is there a difference between missing someone and grieving? Because you said you grieve your grandfather after 30 years. Okay, well, my mom has passed and tears come to my eyes when I think of her at times, but I'm not grieving her. I miss her and I miss the things she used to do for me, but I'm not grieving her. I just miss, but I don't grieve that, oh, my mom is gone and my life is, I'm not grieving. I just miss the fact that she was in my life.
Right. I'm not sure if that is the proper term or not, but the feelings don't just disappear, right?
Right. Never will for someone who's been close and dear to you. It's a difference for me, in my eye view, it's a difference between, like you had mentioned, you said move through it. Yes, you have to move through it because you can't stay stuck in a place and want to, like some people, stay hurting and feeling the pain for whatever reason they feel they should feel the pain from whatever the loss, but they should move through it. And yeah, you don't forget. I never want to forget my mother. Right. Never. But I'm not.
Yeah, I think that's what to talk about. I think that because you're recovering, that you've forgotten them. Go ahead, Anna. I think I took you down and didn't get to.
I think that's the difference between grief and loss. You'll never forget them and everything, because like I'm the same way. I'm an only child and my mother died. She was 90, but I prepared myself in my mind. I'm going to always miss her because I've been with her all my life.
Right.
So, but there's a difference between grieving. There was a grieving period, and I'm not sure I did that either, because I take death totally different from most people. I miss my mom for sure.
This off the term.
My mind and my heart that she's going to, we're all going to pass one day. The sudden death, like my son, he died all of a sudden, and he was like before he turned 50. Now that was a hardship. I still grieve of him, but not like for years and everything, because I guess I set my mind to whatever God says, then it's not much we can do about it, and he'll comfort you even in that. So I just take comfort in the scriptures in the Lord to help get through grief and loss. And there is a difference between grief and just loss. That person is gone and that's your loss, but you still have everything that, the good things to think about them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, before I get to Bridget and the comment in the chat, the second part says, I will be responsible for my own grief process. So maybe we might want to put what Madeline was saying as that point where you're missing the person, but you're not so overwhelmed, part of a stage of the grief. Okay. And I'm going to read the chat and then unmute Bridget. Let's see. There are those who wear their grief like a badge of honor. My opinion is that they need therapy, which, right. I think that goes along with part of one of the slide points, that they kind of milk it, right? They like the feeling of grief, and so they just want that. So I'm going to ask Bridget to unmute herself and go ahead and talk.
Yes, I was agreeing with Madeline. She made a real good point on that. I wanted to let her know that was really, really good, because I had to figure out what was going on with me, because I lost my mother very young. And she was 34 years old, and she lost her fight with breast cancer. I was very, very young. I just couldn't understand. I was so angry, and people don't, admit, but but I was so angry and asking God, like, why would, this happen? I was so upset. So even to this day, and when Mother's Day come around and stuff like that, it gets it gets bad for me. It's like very, very emotional, and I get to crying. I'm like, what is going on? Like my mother died when I was very young. I went through all my whole life without her. So I don't know, like she was saying, I didn't allow it to hold me back, to depress me and to not go on in life. But it comes at around that time of the year, and it gets really bad. It's like I'm reliving this thing all over again. I can just see the funeral in my head and everything. So I was like, what is this I'm going through when it comes time for this Mother's Day to come around? I don't know if I feel some type of a way because I see other people giving their mothers gifts at service, and then there's dinner. They come in the restaurant with their mothers. So I don't know if that part is just hard. I said maybe I should just stay home that whole day and don't even go outside because it's really bad for me. It's terrible. So I like the way Madeline made that point about she's not grieving her mother, but she misses her mother. But I just don't know what takes over me. My emotions and everything they just go crazy. So I don't know about, being on the outskirts, how would I handle that? So, just stay in the house and don't go out on Mother's Day. And I didn't want to do that. So I had to, like Madeline said, I had to get a hold to my emotions and try to figure out, is this greedy or is this depression? What is this? So that was a real good point that Madeline made. Thank you for that, Madeline.
Well, I think we are aware that holidays can be a very difficult time. And I'm just going to say this one little thing and then let Cindy go ahead because she has her hand up. When you talk about the way a person dies, she didn't die a natural death. I guess that would go along with accidental, right? Because she died of an illness. Okay, so that it's more intense than if she had just lived out her days that God had ordinarily planned for us to live on the earth. So it does affect how we respond to the death. Go ahead, Cindy.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is maybe I'm misinterpreting, but for me, I mean, what I've learned going through this, when we went through the class and reading these chapters, that first comes loss, and then that promotes grief. Can you grieve without loss? I think loss is the catapult that creates any kind of grief. And so any levels of that grief can be from severe and traumatic to all the way to where I think was it Anna that was talking about missing her mom? Because I mean, in my experience, for me, yeah, when somebody very close to me passed, it was horrifying. It was traumatic, and it was very hard to deal with. But as the years have gone on, I still miss them, and I think that you can still identify that in the category of grief. Grief has so many different levels, and I guess that's what I learned, or that's what I got out of when we went through this before, and then looking at it again, it sort of reminds me that first comes loss. I mean, how can you grieve something that something hasn't been lost or taken away or killed or died or whatever? However, it was taken away out of a person's life, and then the grief follows. And then what in the beginning when you were talking about if you lose somebody and you're not dealing with it, you're avoiding the grief, and that can come out later on. But I think for me, I mean, I just think that if you've had a loss, you have that grief, and it will continually go on a spiral, either just sort of fade away to where there's a distant missing. And sometimes, yeah, holidays it'll bring up, because I remember, I know when if I hear something about Ukraine, or if I hear anything about you know, during Easter, my grandma painted these beautiful Ukrainian eggs, and I still have some. So different holidays, I think of somebody endearing to me, but I think there's still a little bit of sadness. You miss them. And so there's still that little tiny bit of grief. I guess, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I look at it.
Okay.
That's all.
Tolan, did you still want to say something? You had your hand up.
Yeah, I could speak. When it comes to grief, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
When I think about grieving and loss and grieving, right? I did a study on it before. We go through stages, right? And if I'm not mistaken, one of those stages is also acceptance of the loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we get to a level where some is so intense, where it almost get us bedbound, where we don't want to move, or we depressed. But then we start working through the process where we get to accept that, okay, this loss occurred and I have to still move on with life, but it doesn't take away from the loss because that person or that thing was very to me or had value. So it's where we can function within that loss, because the loss is present, the loss is real, where we can function and be able still to be productive at the same time, longing or missing whoever it was that was a value in our life. So that's how I look at it. I see grief as still acceptance of the loss. It doesn't take away from my productivity in life. So that's very interesting, because Anna has about something that it really made me think different when it came to grief and loss. And I'm glad that we have this forum where we can express it, but I also believe acceptance of grief.
I think understanding and talking about this shows that there's different ways that people walk through it and view it and how it affects them. And so that gives us a broader basis to be able to help people work through it so that they are not devastated and just stay there. Okay, Linda had her hand up. Go ahead, Linda. Go ahead, Linda.
Okay, there. I was trying to unmute me. You know, I look at it, God makes us all different. And one person can have a loss and just battle with it, really have to deal with it. Another person can have a loss and just deal with it better. I don't know if better is the right word. They're able to go on before the other person could. The other thing too, I had a loss, like when I came up here to live, I knew absolutely no one except my husband. And I lost my background, my family. But through it, I became a stronger person. And I remember when my grandmother passed away, I had been gone so long, I didn't feel a terrible loss, but I had such good memories. When I had my first job, she used to, because I could go, I had an hour for lunch and I could go to her house for lunch. She'd cook me a full meal. And I said, Grandma, this 10 pounds I'm gaining is your fault, you know? And so it just depends on how you look at, how you deal with loss. And through the years, I've become stronger and stronger when I had to. That's enough. That's enough. Thank you much.
So that's a point that you can face loss and get stronger, but if you don't go through it in a healthy way, you don't get stronger and it can weaken you. So it's good to have support. It's good to see that there's expressing that her change in environment is a loss of whoever Linda used to be when she was young, right? So it gives us more of an understanding. So another point is I can experience one loss and react one way, and a subsequent or previous loss and go through it a completely different way. So each time we experience a type of loss, the result is different, and we need to treat our losses and each person's loss individually Okay, so back to these cards. Okay, so I believe my grief has a purpose and a result. There's something that God's going to work through that grief. I will be responsible for my own grief process. It's my job. I'm not going to blame other people. I'm not going to rely solely on other people. What I do with it, it's our responsibility, just like sin. How we react, it's our responsibility. I will not be afraid to ask for help. I think that's a problem today. I often do not want to bother people. I will not try to rush my recovery. We talked about people think, oh, in 6 months, you're supposed to be living life the way you were 2 years ago. You know, we have to wait until the healing finishes. If you have a broken leg, your broken leg heals according to your body, and my broken leg heals according to my body. So we have to realize that we each heal in a specific individual manner, and the people we're dealing with also recover in their own way and time. If a loss involves trauma, there are trauma specialists that can step in and help. Okay, so everybody faces traumatic incidents, but not all of us suffer trauma as the result of those incidents. So we're going to talk about trauma in a different time, but there are people that specialize and are trained in dealing with trauma more so than just like we are. So sometimes people need a little extra help in that regard. I mentioned this. Well, not this one. Encourage them to write a letter to friends communicating their grief, a roadmap to teach others how to respond. In the book, it talks about somebody who left an update on their answering machine of what they were going through so that they didn't have to keep repeating themselves to each person. So our friends and our peers may not understand what we're going through. So sometimes it is helpful. And I think somebody mentioned writing a letter to help people as a roadmap to teach others how to respond. So we can also guide people how we need them to respond, because that's not a cookie cutter thing either. You know, some of us need a little bit more of a hug, pat on the back, someone to reach out and take us to lunch or talk to us, and other people we just want to be left alone. And that gives me reminds me culturally, when my youngest daughter died, okay, we were overseas, and some of the Africans that were part of our congregation, their custom was to be with the person. So they came to ICU with us and were there for a time. And then, but the pastor of the international church that we were working at let them know that was nice at the time, but we needed a time by ourselves. Their culture was everybody get together and you go through this together, and a certain amount of that is good, but you also have to understand that there's different ways. So we needed a time by ourselves. We needed to be not a whole bunch of people surrounding us, so that we could be what kind of word? Not alone with our grief, but that's how we needed to be, so that we could feel it and process it and that type of thing. This is what I was talking about. Encourage them to write a letter to and from their grief, allowing them to master it. So we can physically have them address the feelings that they're going through, and this can work for loss of dignity or self-esteem, or if they're angry at somebody that has mistreated them or left them, that you can write to them and then get a letter back from our grief, to be in control of it and to process it. And another thing is there are grief support groups. I was just looking at a video from previously. There's in our area, there's Grief Share, which is a national organization. They have chapters where people can meet together, usually in churches. You could look it up on the internet, and they have you just type in the zip code, and they have like support group meetings for grief. Practical steps. Anything before we address some more practical steps? Okay, then I'll just start off on the slides, and you guys can raise your hands and chime in as you something occurs to you. So we help the survivor identify, evaluate, and express their feelings. Is it anger? Is it do you feel abandoned? There is a person I know whose parent died young, and they are still 20 some years later, they are overwhelmed by feelings of abandonment, and it affects how they deal with life and their family today. Encourage the survivor to send you systematic or indirect updates on email. I mentioned the answering machine, a letter. It's good to follow up, and it's good for them to realize where they are periodically. If every month they can identify some change and let you know. Sometimes they feel overwhelmed by people calling. At first, people are contacting you, and it's, you kind of get tired of people asking, well, how are you doing? How are you doing? How is your mom feeling, or whatever? So sometimes indirect updates is less overwhelming. Designated crying time. Sometimes people just find themselves emotional all the time. There's nothing wrong with crying. We always try to say, don't cry, you're a man, and all this other stuff. Or we get uncomfortable because with the crying, and we feel like we're overreacting maybe. But there are times when people are just uncontrollably weeping and emotional all the time. So saying, I'm going to set this time every day or this time weekly to just let it all out, and then we can control our emotions. We can control ourselves from screaming and yelling or whatever. So just getting a hold of ourselves and releasing ourselves, so helping them to just release those emotions during this set period of time, and then it doesn't overwhelm them throughout 24/7. A remembrance list. Good thing, right? To think about things that we're fond of, to help us not forget wonderful events or situations or places, to help us. It's kind of nostalgic. Nostalgia can be positive, and sometimes people go down the road and can make it melancholy. There's a difference between remembering and falling into being melancholy. Journaling. Some people feel it's a good outlet for them to record and give a chronicle of what they're going through. When I had cancer, I had blog posts that I published that are still available, but about what I was going through physically, but also applying spiritual encouraging messages to it. So that, can help yourself, and it can help other people. Any steps that any of you want to add that you think might be helpful? Okay, well then, if you think of something, just raise your hand or unmute. Okay, many times people have regrets because they were not able to reconcile with someone. So you've hurt somebody and you didn't get a chance to say you were sorry, or in the Old Testament they had restitution. You stole something and you had to give them something back. So there's different ways that people do make amends. You try to perhaps do something to help the family member, or many people volunteer, for example, with an organization to make up for something that they've done. Often people go into things like being a chaplain or social work because of things that have happened to them in their past. Offer forgiveness. If people are gone and you need to forgive them for something that they've done, bring that to the altar with God, or write them a letter, or you could do something again to make amends. Express emotions. Be able to say, this is what you mean to me, you meant to me. Create a memorial. When my daughter died, my sister-in-law planted a tree. There may be something, we have a picture of her that someone, an artist that we knew at the time, painted of her. And we have certain things. There was a thing about Paddington Bear that went on at the time. So there's a couple of things like Paddington Bear mugs, that I have that would just make me think about Elena. Just a thought that this is something that represents my daughter to me. Release to God in prayer. That, of course, can be a constant, continual thing to release to God in prayer, especially if somebody has hurt you or abused you, that when they go, you might say good riddance, but you have to reconcile with that, what they've done, and releasing these things to the Lord. Cast all your care upon him, for he cares for you. Comments? Okay, so we've reached the end of my notes and the book session for today. So students, we're going to do chapter 6 in the Ethics 101 book, to read that, and the week 7 homework questions apply to that. And if you have the faith book, I encourage you to continue to read